The studio glowed with its usual friendly warmth, pastel lights bouncing off polished floors as the audience buzzed with anticipation. Producers moved briskly along the edges, whispering cues into headsets, adjusting microphones, smoothing tiny wrinkles no one at home would ever notice. The band played a soft, upbeat riff meant to keep the mood light. Everything about the Kelly Clarkson show was designed to feel safe, cheerful, inviting, like a living room where hard edges were rounded off by laughter and music. Prince Harry sat across from Kelly Clarkson with an easy posture at first, hands loosely folded, shoulders relaxed. He wore a polite smile that suggested practice. Years of public appearances had trained it into him, but there was something genuine beneath it, too. When Kelly welcomed him, the applause was loud and warm, a mix of curiosity and admiration rippling through the audience. Harry nodded appreciatively, scanning the crowd for a brief second before turning back to her. They began where most daytime interviews do, small talk. California weather. Raising kids away from palace walls. The surreal difference between royal schedules and school drop-offs. Harry chuckled softly at one point, telling a short story about getting lost on a quiet neighborhood walk, no security detail in sight, just another dad with a phone in his pocket. The audience laughed, and Kelly grinned, clearly enjoying the rhythm of it. For several minutes, the conversation flowed easily. Kelly teased him about learning to live without centuries of protocol, and Harry played along, joking about finally being able to choose his own breakfast without a briefing. The band chimed in with playful stings, and the cameras caught Kelly nodding along, relaxed, engaged. On the surface, it was everything viewers expected. But Kelly had a way of letting conversations deepen without warning. Her voice softened slightly as she shifted gears, her eyes steady, thoughtful. She spoke about public life, about how fame, even unwanted fame, comes with a kind of responsibility that doesn't vanish just because someone wishes it would. It wasn't an accusation, not at first. It sounded more like a reflection. Harry's smile faltered just a little. He adjusted in his chair, one hand brushing the armrest. He spoke carefully, choosing his words with precision, explaining his desire for peace, for privacy, for a chance to live without every step dissected by strangers. His tone remained calm, but the warmth in it cooled. Kelly listened, really listened, nodding as he spoke. Then she gently pushed back. She talked about contradictions, how stepping away from one spotlight can sometimes mean stepping into another. How telling one's story publicly, again and again, invites attention even when the intention is closure. Her voice wasn't sharp, but it was honest. The audience shifted, sensing the change. A few people stopped clapping between sentences, unsure now when it was appropriate. Harry inhaled slowly before responding. His answers became shorter, more guarded. He spoke about trauma, about carrying the weight of expectations from childhood, about the toll of constant judgment. His jaw tightened, and his eyes briefly flicked away from Kelly, toward the studio lights overhead. The brightness seemed harsher now, less forgiving. Kelly, still calm, mentioned family, how choices ripple outward, how silence and distance can echo just as loudly as words. She wasn't naming names, but the implication hung in the air. The studio fell quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy rather than peaceful. Even the band remained still. For a moment, Harry didn't respond. He sat very still, fingers pressed together, eyes fixed on a spot just beyond the cameras. The practiced smile was gone. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled, but the strain beneath it was unmistakable. He said boundaries were necessary. That survival sometimes looks selfish from the outside. That not everyone understands what it costs to walk away from everything you were born into. Kelly didn't interrupt. She leaned slightly forward, hands clasped, and acknowledged his pain. But she didn't retreat. She spoke about accountability, not as punishment, but as connection. About how public conversations can heal or harm, depending on how honestly they're handled. Her words weren't cruel, but they were firm, and that firmness landed like a challenge. The audience could feel it now. This wasn't a scripted moment, wasn't a rehearsed talking point. A few people glanced at one another. Somewhere off camera, a producer shifted uncomfortably. Harry's shoulders rose as he took a breath, then fell again, slower this time. He replied again, but the ease was gone. Each sentence felt measured, weighed. He emphasized his right to step back, to choose what parts of his life were shared and what parts were protected. His voice carried an edge now, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the softness of the set. Kelly nodded, but her expression held steady. She spoke one more time about courage, not just the courage to leave, but the courage to stay and face uncomfortable questions. The words weren't dramatic, but in the stillness of the studio, They sounded louder than applause. The tension settled over the room like a fog. Harry leaned back in his chair, lips pressed together, eyes briefly closing as if he were counting something internally. When he opened them again, there was a finality there, a decision made. He adjusted his jacket, rose slowly to his feet, and offered a polite, restrained nod. He thanked Kelly for the conversation, his tone respectful but distant, as though a wall had been quietly raised. Kelly stood as well, clearly surprised but composed, reaching out verbally, reminding him that difficult conversations don't have to erase respect. Harry nodded once more, said nothing else, and turned toward the side of the stage. His footsteps sounded louder than expected against the studio floor as he walked away, leaving behind a silence no amount of warm lighting could soften. The moment Prince Harry disappeared behind the curtain, the studio seemed to exhale all at once. A ripple of confused applause broke out, hesitant, uneven, then faded as quickly as it began. The cameras lingered for a beat longer than usual, catching Kelly Clarkson standing alone under the lights, her expression carefully neutral. Years of live television had trained her well, but even that experience couldn't fully mask the weight of what had just happened. Kelly turned back toward the audience, shoulders squared, hands resting lightly on the chair Harry had just vacated. She took a breath, slow and deliberate, the kind singers use before a difficult note. "Well," she said softly, offering a small, human smile. "That was a real conversation." A few nervous laughs flooded through the crowd. She nodded, acknowledging the discomfort instead of pretending it didn't exist. She spoke calmly, without drama, about how not every discussion ends neatly, how honesty can sometimes collide with pain. Her words weren't defensive, nor apologetic. They felt grounded, like someone choosing transparency over spectacle. "Sometimes," she added, "growth starts when we don't all agree." The audience applauded then, louder this time, not out of excitement, but appreciation. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Producers exchanged quick looks, murmuring into headsets. One assistant hurried toward the hallway Harry had taken, stopping short when a security staffer subtly shook his head. It was clear, he was gone, and he wasn't coming back for a closing wave or a quiet off-camera chat. In the green room corridor, Harry moved with purpose, his stride tight, controlled. A producer attempted a polite goodbye, thanking him for coming. He nodded, offered a brief, courteous response, and kept walking. His face wasn't angry, it was closed off, as though he had sealed something inside himself. The door to the exit swung open, letting in a rush of cooler air that felt like relief. Outside, the city hummed on, unaware that a daytime talk show had just crossed into something far messier than entertainment. Back in the studio, the show moved on. A commercial break came and went. The band played. Another segment followed, bright and energetic, but the earlier tension lingered like an echo no one could quite shake. Crew members worked flawlessly, professionals to the core, yet whispers followed them between camera resets. As soon as the episode wrapped, phones lit up everywhere. Clips began circulating within minutes. Headlines formed fast, sharpened by speculation, unexpected exit, tense exchange, royal walk-off. Some viewers praised Harry for protecting his boundaries, calling his exit an act of self-preservation. Others applauded Kelly for asking the questions many felt had gone unanswered for years. The internet did what it always does: split, amplified, debated. Kelly sat alone in her dressing room for a moment after the taping, still in her show outfit, makeup half removed. She stared at her reflection